But I'm telling you, it's still working.
Rhonda!
Oh, all right. Here.
It's not for me, Stoop.
I was watching television with Charlene, and there were two shows. I won't say what they are because it doesn't matter. But language took an important part in those shows. We never even thought of coming close to any kind of foul language or anything. Or even, yeah, here, yeah.
We've all but made up for it today.
So, yes. But it was never, we never wandered into that area.
Well, those are really easy laughs.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be...
You couldn't back then, though, could you?
No.
No.
I mean, you had the sensors on you a lot.
Well...
They would watch very carefully.
Well...
Hi. I'm Joe Namath, professional football player. These pantyhose can make my legs look good. Just think what they'll do for yours.
Okay, the guys are all done. You can use the shower now.
She beat everybody as far as longevity, and the quality of the material was always on the highest level. Everything about it, from the costuming to the special material, what a bunch of great writers and songwriters she had working for her.
I'll put my Bruce Hancock on a Bruce Hancock to protect my family.
We got his Bruce Hancock on a Bruce Hancock to protect his family.
Interestingly enough, a lot of these things I can't remember doing, but I see them on reruns, and it's like watching them for the first time. And they're funny. They really are. And so if something's funny, it's going to be funny then and now and forever.
We would tape 2 shows on Friday. The dress rehearsal, which we did tape, and that was at 5 o'clock with an audience, and we would do the show to the ink. In other words, just the way we rehearsed it, all the way it was written and everything. And so usually Tim would go to our director, Dave Powers, after that show and ask him if he got all the shots, if everything's okay, so forth. Fine. See, that was our backup. Then Tim would say something, well, let me give you an example. He would say, okay, Dave, in the hotel sketch, when I go over to the window to do the bit of business and so forth, be on a head-to-toe shot of me as opposed to a waist shot. That's all he would say. Dave, none of us knew what Tim was going to do. So he would wind up doing some shtick that had never been done in rehearsal before or on the previous show. And inevitably, the sketch would run maybe 4 minutes long, over. And so what we would do would be to cut down on something else or save another sketch for another week. Because what Tim would come up with was gold. We did one where we were doing a Columbo takeoff. And I was the evil twin sister, and I'd killed my sweet sister, and I was pretending to be the sweet one. And Harvey was the husband, and Stevie Lawrence was going to play Columbo. Now, Tim was our butler. So, bing bong, the doorbell is ringing, and Harvey says, Jeeves, get in here. I don't know if that was his name, but he'd get in here, open the door, open the door. Yes, sir. Now, he goes to open, he said, but he can't, he's going to open the door, and it's this huge doorknob, right? Like about that big. And he starts to open it, and Harvey says, no. Jeeves, no. Fingerprints, we have to put on your gloves. All right, sir. So he takes out his gloves, he puts them on. Then he tries to open the thing, but it's sliding. He said, I just waxed the doorknob, sir. And I can't. He said, open the door. And he keeps trying and trying. He pulls like a little rope out, and he wraps the rope around like a motorboat. Didn't work. Didn't work. Okay. Now he looks up. Never did this in rehearsal. And there's a ledge above the door. He pulls himself up on that ledge, turns himself around, and the doorknob is right in his crotch. And he starts doing this, like a pair of pliers, trying to open the door. Well, the audience is going crazy, and Harvey and I are sitting on the couch over there trying not to, I don't know, ruin our depends. Anyway, so Harvey goes up and he pushes him out, and it was, he'd never done it. But that whole doorknob bit went for about 3 minutes, and it was just, again, gold. I think what Tim must have done, you have to check with him on this, is between dress and air, or even rehearsals, the blocking rehearsal on the previous day, I think he would check out everything in the set, and the little wheels would be turning for him to do some shtick that we had never seen before. And maybe when nobody was around, he might have gotten up there when we were on a lunch break or something and tried this to see. I don't know. Harvey, I had been a fan of his when I was watching the Danny Kaye show. He was Danny's Carl Reiner, And so Danny's show was going off the air, had been canceled, and then we were going on the air that following September. And I don't know, we're sitting around and we're saying, what we need is a Harvey Korman. And we're saying, well, who can be a Harvey Korman? And finally somebody said, how about Harvey Korman? And we said, of course, and he was getting into his car at CBS in the parking lot, and I was going for mine. I think I tackled him and threw him over the hood of a car, because I said, you've got to be on our show. Please say you'll be on our show. And that's how we met. He probably thought I was a stalker at first, but in a way I was. And Harvey signed on, and that's how we got Harvey. I didn't want to get political because I'm not overtly political. And it just wasn't my bailiwick. It wasn't for me to do. The Smothers Brothers had a lock on that, and they were brilliant. And but I just, I grew up in an era in the 40s and early 50s of seeing movies a lot. And that was my favorite pastime as a kid, just to go and just be totally absorbed in what was going on the big screen. And it always had a happy ending, or the bad guys would get it, and it was just very, very, nothing was cynical in the movies in those days. And so that I was raised with that kind of a feeling that I didn't want to be controversial at all. I just wanted, I'm a clown, and I wanted to make people laugh, Belly laughs are good. And also, one thing that happens with political stuff is that it becomes dated. And our show, there's sketches in there that are as funny today as they were all those years ago. When I was little, my girlfriend, Isla May, and we grew up together in the neighborhood and went to the same school and everything. And we would go to the movies, and then we would come home and play the movie and I would be Betty Grable. She would be June Haver, and we would improvise and pretend that we were in the movie and so forth. Same thing with Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney and all of those. And so then when I got my own show, I thought, oh, I can do movies. I can be Betty Grable. I can be Rita Hayworth. I can be Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, all of those, with costumes, with lighting, with a cast, of characters, and an orchestra. It was I was a grown up doing what I did as a kid, but a lot more elaborate. You know? And it was just a thrill for me. And I remember when we had Betty Grable on, I was just out of my mind. You know, and Rita Hayworth came on our show, and so did Gloria Swanson when we did the takeoff on Sunset Boulevard. The first one, she called. She said, "I want to come and play." And I mean, all of that was such a, and then there were some movies that were kind of nobody remembered, but the plot was so cliched that it was funny anyway. I remember we did one that was called Born to Be Bad, and it starred Joan Fontaine and Zachary Scott, and she was just this evil witch. And so we did a takeoff on that. We called it Raised to Be Rotten. And a few fans kind of knew it, but nobody else knew it, but I knew it, and it was a very funny takeoff. Gone with the Wind was going to be released in a new version, not a new version, but I mean updated with the color and all, and you know, for the first time on television. So we said, okay, we're going to do our homage to Gone with the Wind. And so these two writers we had were so good that he, in fact, he had done his thesis on Gone with the Wind. And they were very young. And his name was Rick Hawkins and Liz Sage. They wrote this one. And it was brilliantly written. They hit every high note, you know, that was in the movie and everything. And, you know, and Tim played Ashley, and Harvey was a brilliant rat butler. I was Starlet O'Hara, and Dinah Shore was Melanie. Mellie, we called her. And Vicky was Miss Prissy, our maid. Anyway, it was brilliant up until, and then Rat is coming to see us, and I don't want him to think we're poor, as Scarlett didn't. And so Vicky, as Sissy says, she says, "I know what, you ought to hide behind the drapes." And then that gives me the idea, and I tear the draperies down, and I say, "Now you keep him company. I got me a dress to make." And then I run up the stairs, and then I was gonna, they had written that I just throw the draperies on me and just come down where it's just kind of sloppy, and which, you know, wasn't that funny. And so I went into costume fittings on Wednesday. We're doing the show on Friday or Thursday, I don't know. Anyway, Bob Mackey, our costume designer, said, "I have an idea." I said, "What?" He said, "Come here." And we went into the other room, and there was the curtain rod dress. And I couldn't speak. I was laughing so hard, you know, that I was crying. I said, "My goodness, this is the funniest sight gag I think I've ever seen in my life." Well, I didn't show it to any of the crew. Or I did show it to Harvey. You know, he saw it in my dressing room, and because I didn't want him to crack up. You know, it wouldn't have been right at that moment. And when I came out, and there was the curtain rod dress, that was one of the longest laughs we ever got, and that was the genius of Bob Mackey. Well, I needed a strong comedic actor like Harvey Korman, but also a hunk, we thought, you know. And so we sent out the word, and a lot of hunks came in to audition. And but the one that impressed all the receptionists the most was Lyle. And he came in, he auditioned, he was charming and stuff. And so at the beginning, I was still the kind of kooky, zany, crazy, man-crazy Carol. And so when he would come out to talk to me or whatever and going to announce something, I'd say, "Oh, aren't you cute?" And it was real good. That changed after a while because I was a grown woman, married, and had a couple of kids. Anyway, but Lyle was very funny. He was able, we put him in sketches. He wasn't really the announcer that much anymore. We would use him in sketches, and he would come up with shtick himself, and was a very good actor. and had the comedy chops, that you need in a variety show. He left after, I think it was a 6th year or something, 7th year, to go do Wonder Woman, but I just love him. And, we're certainly friends to this day. Vicki Lawrence, this was in December of 1966. And I was, I told people I was about 14 months pregnant. And I'm sitting at the desk in our home, and I'm reading letters, fan mail, that had been sent to me through CBS. And so some of the letters were, maybe written a month before or 3 weeks before, whatever, that finally it got to me. And there was this letter from this young girl who was, I think, 17, 18. She's graduating from high school. And she, it was a very intelligently written letter. And she also said that everybody says that, she says, everybody thinks I remind them of you, and so she also mentioned that she was going to be in a contest in Inglewood for the title of Miss Fireball of Inglewood. And there were about 9 or 10 girls who were going to be in this contest. And I read that, and then she enclosed a newspaper clipping that had a picture of her in the paper, in the local paper. And I thought, oh my goodness, that looks like me at UCLA, And I thought, well, this is interesting. And I looked at the date that the Miss Fireball, it was going to be that very night that I'd received the letter. It's taken 3 weeks to get to me, and it's, by golly, it's that night, And I thought, I wonder. And in the paper, it also listed her father's name, Howard. So I called the operator and got their number because I wanted to make sure that Vicki would be comfortable if we showed up. I didn't want to throw her or anything, So I dialed the phone, and this lovely voice, she said, hello. I said, hi, is Vicki home? Is Vicki Lawrence there? She said, this is her mother. Who's calling? And I said, oh, well, you see, I got her letter. This is Carol Burnett. Vicki! Oh, anyway, we went to see the my husband came down the stairs, and I said, don't get too comfortable. We're going to go to see the Miss Fireball of Inglewood contest tonight. And he said, what are you, and I explained it to him, and he said, well, we can't go. I said, I'm 14 months pregnant, and I want to go. Don't argue with me. So we went. Vicki won the contest. And we saw her backstage and everything, and so then we auditioned her with a couple of other girls over the summer, and we hired Vicki. She was very raw and everything, but she picked it up. She was, and we hired her actually to be in some sketches where she would play my kid sister. And of course later she played my mother. A lot of times people think that we were cracking up on purpose, and it was not what we wanted to do at all, which I guess is what made it so delicious, because you could tell that we were fighting it. Harvey considered himself a fine actor, and he was, and he would get so mad at himself because Tim would take off and do this stuff that he hadn't done in rehearsal. I dare anybody not to laugh. And Lyle was terrific. Lyle couldn't break up easily, but Tim got him in a sketch when he played a Nazi interrogator. And Lyle was a grounded U.S. Air Force guy, and he got him really good. And Vicki was very good at it. I was okay, and Harvey was just a piece of mush when Tim took off. Oh, well, she got on a roll. We were doing Eunice and Mama, and so originally it was like, what's the matter with you, Eunice? Is your pilot light out? What's going on here? And then She, on air, she did about 3 or 4 of them, like, is your pilot light out? Then you're not playing with a full deck. What is it? Is this your time of the month? And then she said, are you riding the cotton pony? I thought, there was just no way, you know, and of course the audience went crazy. It's, I think it's on YouTube, I'm not sure, that, you know, some of those outtakes. But there was one time when Tim broke himself up. It was an Ad Man sketch with Harvey and Steve Lawrence and Tim. And Tim had put, they were in a restaurant sitting in a booth. And for the air show, Tim had put spinach on his teeth. And so we thought he'd get Harvey when he smiled at him, right? Well, Harvey was fine. He was just doing it. And then Tim realized it wasn't there anymore. And he lost it. He totally lost it. He cracked up. He was crying. There was another time, too, when he kind of cracked up a little bit. He's doing the Jaws takeoff, and he's playing the shark hunter. And he's telling a story to Harvey and Vicky. And he said, yeah, my wife and I were in Sharkfield Waters or something like that, and she wanted to go for a swim, and she jumped in, and white shark got her. He said she'd have been okay if she hadn't, oh God, I'm gonna screw it up. She'd been okay if she hadn't been wearing her lucky ham. Yeah, that was it. She'd have been okay if she had been wearing her lucky ham. And he made that up. That wasn't in the script. And then he started to laugh himself. It was hard for him to get that out.
My mom really urged me to write that fan letter because everybody said I looked like Carol Burnett. I honestly don't remember. And people used to accuse me of studying her and trying to copy her mannerisms. And I honestly don't remember seeing Carol Burnett a whole lot on television. I remember seeing Once Upon a Mattress, mostly because we were going to do it as our high school musical. But I did not audition for the lead, and I thought the girl that did it was much better than I ever could have been. I was busy singing with the Young Americans, so it didn't never occur to me to audition for that. And I remember seeing her occasionally on The Entertainers, but mostly because I had a crush on John Davidson. So I certainly didn't study Carol Burnett. I was really trying to be Mary Tyler Moore. You know, I wore my hair in the flip, I wore the capris, I was really trying to, that's who I really was in love with, was, well, her and Dick Van Dyke both. I was in love with both of them. And then I cut my hair really short before I went into high school, and everybody said, you look just like Carol Burnett. So my mom said, write the fan letter, because I was a big fan letter writer when I was a kid. Well, I had stuff all over my bedroom walls, everybody that was on television at the time. But I gotta say, mostly the guys. No offense, Carol. It was mostly, you know, like Johnny Crawford and Fabian and Clint Eastwood and, you know, the who's who of guys that were on television at the time. The whole way I got on the show is so coincidental. And I many times said to Carol, what are the odds? And she said to me many times, you will find that the fan letters that you get that are actually in English, that actually have something to say other than, may I please have a picture, are very few and far between. And she's right, and probably even more so today. Who's writing letters? I guess you just tweet your favorite celebrity or something, right? Yeah. I was singing with the Young Americans when I met her. And I remember going to the director of the Young Americans when I got this audition. And he sat me down, he said, you listen to me, young lady. What are the odds of anything happening here? And if you back out of the summer tour, and this doesn't pan out, which very frankly, what are the odds? You're not coming back in the middle of the tour, you're gone. And at the time, it was a very traumatic decision for me to say, I think maybe I'm gonna roll these dice. It was very traumatic. It was one of those pivotal moments in my life that honestly almost could have gone either way. Yeah, but a major decision. And And then I think I told the story about the first week at CBS and wandering up there and meeting Red Skelton and just seeing this huge stage. And I mean, I think I embraced it, but it was very surreal. The whole thing was very surreal to me. I think I was a goofy kid. I mean, I remember doing a little comedy stuff in the Young Americans. I would always do the funny songs. I was like the comedy relief in the little movie we did, the Young Americans. But honestly, really, and I don't know if it's because I grew up in such close proximity to Hollywood, that it just never occurred to me. I mean, my dad worked for years at Max Factor, so I was always up in Hollywood. But I honestly thought I was going to be a dental hygienist. I was going to learn to clean teeth, marry a rich dentist, and hang it up. That's what I thought. Maybe because I had a crush on her. I had to have a lot of male crushes, didn't I? Yeah. It's kind of hard not to learn from her, if just by osmosis. And I think certainly one of the most important things I learned was how I think a show should run. Because not all shows run like that. She is just very giving and loving and caring and nurturing. And my God, when I was early on the show, she'd say, well, we need the writers to come down and watch this. We need to change this. Vicki needs a new joke on page 13. And I was a needle pointer back in the days. I'd go, I do? And she'd say, hush, yes, you do. I mean, that just doesn't really happen. There's definitely a trickle-down theory from the top. I mean, that's really true. Carol knew everybody on her staff, everybody on her crew. She cared about everybody. If you were doing something funny, she'd be the first person out of her dressing room on the side laughing with the audience. She was giving and nurturing, and I think that's why the show had that warm, loving quality. Yeah, she's like a really real person. I mean, Lord knows, put her on a pedestal for, I don't know that I ever said more than 2 words to her for a lot of years because it was so surreal the way I even came to be there was so surreal. And I sort of like idolized her while at the same time I was learning from her. I don't know what happened to me would ever happen nowadays. I mean, the closest thing I can think of is American Idol, but those people are they're so great before they even get on the air at all. I think nowadays the Suits would come downstairs and say, get rid of her and get an actress. I don't know where that happens to anybody. Harvey would say to me, you have no idea. He would recount a lot of ugly stories about people not being very nice. And I do think I said in that big round table that a lot of the older people that had worked with Carol or had been around for a lot of years would all the time say to me, wait till you get out into the real world of showbiz, kid, because this ain't it. This is a very special place. It was just so incredibly well organized, that show. And it's to this day, people will say to me, sometimes people will say, what exactly is it that an executive producer does? Well, a good executive producer, from what I have learned, hires all the best people, puts them in the right positions, and then backs off and lets them do their job. And that doesn't happen a whole lot anymore. But that show ran like a top because everybody got to excel at what they were hired for. Nobody got a thumb put on them. Nobody got squashed. It was all about fly, baby, fly. Carol had a show to run. And Harvey, being the team player that he is, and Harvey, of everybody, would just work and work and work on a sketch when we all knew it wasn't working. He would never say die. I will say that about Harvey. And he was technically trained as an actor, so comedy was very serious business to him. And when I came on board, and he used to hate it when I would tell these stories, but I swear to God, I think it was either take me under his wing or kill me. Because he would say to me, forget stage right, stage left, you couldn't even find the toilet. So I think he really felt it was his duty, since I was going to be around, to train me. And he would work with me on dialects and props. And he's the first person who ever said to me, "Make your props your friends." He'd tell me who I was in a lot of those movie takeoffs. I didn't know those old movies, like Carol did. Yeah, he definitely, I think, taught me most everything I know about comedy. And I used to say to him, "Do I need to go to school?" And he'd say, "No, you're here. You're at the Harvard School of Comedy. You just sit down and shut up and watch." And it's true. I would sit in that audience. I mean, I started at UCLA the same fall I started on Carol's show. And the deal was, you may go to college as long as you're as long as you're here in the morning by 11 o'clock. And so I was on and off campus at UCLA, you know, with my scarf on my head before. That was my college life. I didn't really have much of a college life. Took everything you could take at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and finally got to the point where I needed to declare a major. And I thought, well, I guess I'll declare theater because I guess that's where I'm going. And then I couldn't commit to that because they wanted me to do, you were required to do a quarter of crew work every year. You were required to audition for everything. If you got the part, you were required to do it. And we were, in the beginning, blocking on Fridays and taping on Saturdays, and those were show days at UCLA. So I got to the point where I just didn't know what to do. I went to my favorite theater professor, who had the watch and the watch pocket and the pipe, and it was theater history. And I said, "What am I going to do?" And he said, "You want my advice? You go get a notepad and sit in the audience and watch the best teachers in the whole world. You are where every kid in this department would give their right arm to be." And it devastated my parents, because my dad went to UCLA. My mom always wanted me to go to college because she didn't. And so I said, okay. She was just so devastated that I said, okay, I will declare a dance major. And because they were going to be much more lenient about the performing part. And the first day, my counselor said, "You have to go in and take Dance 1A." And I had been, going to dance classes for years in Hollywood. You have to do Dance 1A, and that was interpretive, creative. And I remember the first day in class, I'm lying on the floor next to this giant girl next to me, and the teacher says, "Today we will be seaweed. We are rolling around on the ocean floor." And I'm going, oh, for crying out loud, could we just do a traveling time step? Rolling around on the floor didn't we do this in high school? And this giant girl rolls over on top of me, and I just went, oh man, I can't do this. I got up, I went over, I got my backpack, and the teacher's still going, and the waves are splashing over, and she's watching me pick up my stuff and leave. And that was the end of, I couldn't do it. I left UCLA. But I think coincidentally, 2 years, which is roughly what Carol did there. Yeah. Yeah, he's in a completely different world. Yeah, he's different game plan. Yeah. That's probably why Tim and Harvey were so great together, because Harvey was so on script and always trying to fix stuff and make it right that he was probably sitting there just totally fascinated